This is Souter Lighthouse, and it's got a lot to answer for. It has saved countless lives, but it's done more than that, because in 1871 it shone a light as clear as day on the future. Souter stands between the Tyne and the Wear. Sunderland on the Wear and Newcastle on the Tyne were both very busy ports in the 1860s. Happy days. But there was a problem. As many as 20 ships a year were lost on the notorious Marsden Rocks. Something had to be done. A lighthouse was clearly the answer. But the lighthouses at the time weren't very effective. They helped, but they weren't brilliant. Excuse the pun.
Lighthouses were traditionally lit by oil lamps, but these were a poor source of illumination, often difficult to see from the deck of a ship. So in order to make lighthouses brighter, you needed a new source of power.
Electricity seems obvious to us, but 140 years ago people were still dependent on candles and gas lamps to light their homes.
For centuries, electricity had fascinated scientists and been used as a form of public amusement. It wasn't until pioneering experiments were carried out here at the Royal Institution that its true potential began to emerge.
Michael Faraday, the father of electricity, one of the greatest scientists ever. He must have been. He was on the old £20 note. He conducted most of his experiments into magnetism and electricity here at the Royal Institution, and his practical demonstrations to a distinguished audience of fellow scientists and enthusiastic VIPs were the talk of the town.
On the 17th of October 1831, in his laboratory at the Royal Institution, Faraday made an amazing discovery using simply a magnet and a wire coil.
When you agitate the magnet within the coil, you can either rotate it or, in this instance, move it up and down. The lines of force in the magnet are cutting the wires. This, as you can see by these lights being illuminated, is generating electricity. Nowadays we'd say that we were exciting the electrons, but of course at that point Faraday didn't know that. What he did know was by doing this he was generating electricity. And the bigger the magnet you used and the more coils you had, the more current you could generate.
But Faraday was a man of theory and experiment, uninterested in the world outside his lab.
Square-toed Cuban heel. Nice one, Mike. Electricity was confined to the laboratory. It was a scientific curiosity. What it needed to become a powerful technology was a practical application. Enter an engineer, Frederick Hale Holmes. He had a brilliant idea.
And here it is. Holmes' high-output generator was the first in the world to be put to practical use. It was made of a series of discs with U-shaped magnets set round the edge. In between the discs, he set the wire coils. When the discs were rotated, a current was induced in the coil. Power is all very well, but it needed a purpose, and Holmes found it in the form of carbon arc lamps. This is the lecture theatre at the Royal Institution, and it was here that an amazing experiment was demonstrated by Faraday's great mentor under the enthralled gaze of society's finest.
The principle of the carbon arc lamp had been discovered in 1802 by a chemistry professor, Sir Humphrey Davy. In his experiment, he connected two carbon rods via wires to a primitive battery. He found that if he moved the rods apart, a spark crossed the gap between. It was the most brilliant light, apart from the sun, that anybody had ever seen. Holmes came up with a fantastic conjunction. He thought he could use his generator to power a carbon arc light to provide the brightest possible illumination in a lighthouse.
It was a major breakthrough. In 1857, Holmes sent his proposal to Trinity House, governors of the lighthouses of England and Wales. Following trials supervised by none other than Michael Faraday, his generator and arc lamp were given the go-ahead and installed at Suta in 1871.
This is very much the business end of the lighthouse. Here is where the carbon arc lamp would have been placed. Fortunately now it's an electric bulb. Boo hiss. This arrangement is called the diopter. What all these prisms do is concentrate the power of the arc lamp 230 times, which meant it had an astonishing 700,000 candle power. The other marvellous thing about it, of course, is that it moves.
This lighthouse was the most technologically advanced in the world, transforming the lives of those at sea. One American observer noted that it cast shadows on the deck of his boat.
The light was so bright, the lighthouse keepers had to wear these dark glasses to check on the carbon rods. The problem was that carbon arc lamps are brilliant for lighthouses, but not very good for your front room. Here's the solution to the problem. The incandescent light bulb, invented in 1878 by a chemist from Sunderland called Joseph Swan. And a very simple and elegant solution it is too. Carbon thread is held in a vacuum. That's the carbon thread, the wiggly bit in the middle, inside a glass vessel, in this case a sphere. So, when currents pass through the carbon thread, it glows, it becomes incandescent. This is a replica of Swan's first functional incandescent light. It's a replica because he tested all of his to destruction. Good lad. Doesn't look much like a light bulb because it's a prototype. It's an experiment. But would it work in practice?
Swan's light bulb was a brilliant idea, but he needed to test it. His friend, millionaire industrialist Lord Armstrong, had the perfect place.
Armstrong was fabulously wealthy. He's made his money in arms. He'd sold guns to both sides in the American Civil War. Canny. And he was also obsessed with electricity. And in the grounds of Cragside, his magnificent Parkland mansion, he'd built the world's first private power station, 1,500 yards from his front door.
The first of its kind, his hydroelectric power station, utilised water from this lake, which Armstrong had specially created high up in the grounds of his estate.
The water is then piped for about 1.5 miles down the hillside till it ends up here at the powerhouse. And this is Armstrong's personal private power station. Here is the water from the lake under huge pressure, and then, cleverly, it's controlled by this, a gate valve. It comes along here, mind the union, and then it goes into the turbine, a water fan. It is revolving at huge speed. That turns this central shaft. There's a bearing to make sure it doesn't vibrate too much, and then it turns the rotor inside this, the generator. These are the electromagnetic coils. Same principle as Faraday's, only a bit more complicated. And there you have it. Lecky for free via water. Except, of course, you've got to dig the reservoir, and there's the pipe work and the installation of the plant. But you get the principle.
This magnificent baronial mansion was the first privately lit and powered house in the world. At the flick of a switch, instant light. Magic! Armstrong, an emperor of industry, had an extraordinary talent for seeing the commercial potential of scientific advances.
He first tried lighting the gallery with carbon arc lights, and when his friend Swan's incandescent lamp was available, he festooned the house with 45 of them, 20 of them here. He reckoned when they were at full power, the pictures were illuminated as if by daylight, and visitors were staggered by the brightness of the lights. Most of the illumination in the house came simply from Swan's incandescent bulbs, naked light bulbs basically, although because they were of such low voltage, 110 DC, Armstrong said they presented a beautiful star-like appearance, not injurious to the eye in passing.
No one had ever attempted anything like this before. It was a complicated installation.
There are 3,000 feet of cable in Cragside, all containing copper wire to Birmingham number 1 gauge. Thank you very much. They supplied 45 lamps with power, but unfortunately there was only enough generated down here to have 37 on at once. So here, the caretaker of electrical power had a constant juggling act. What would happen is that the butler would telephone him on this telephone. Sorry, telephone, it's a new item, so I'm not quite up to speed on that. And give instructions. Thank you! He would then switch power from rooms that were no longer needed to those that were. For example, the gentlemen were moving to the billiard room, so we no longer need light in the dining room. There we go. It's worth mentioning, of course, that all of this would have been live. Not very nice in a room surrounded by water.
Armstrong, the Geordie genius, had, with the combination of his power station and Swan's lights, pioneered the domestic use of electricity. His system would provide the model for a massive technological expansion.
Electricity is such a brilliant form of power. It's clean, it's adaptable, it's very on and offable. Everybody wanted it, not just for lighting, but for factory applications, for all sorts of things. Now, Cragside's all very well if you're wealthy enough to build yourself a power station. But how are the rest of us supposed to get hold of it? Electricity was pioneered up north. Down south in Brighton, absolutely the holiday destination for the discerning Victorian, electricity was about to make its debut in public transport. Magnus Volk, a Brighton-based clockmaker, had a spiffing idea for a railway. Along about 6 miles per hour. When it was first built, the railway ran at 3 miles per hour. But this car, with its 1925 electric motors, is capable of 13 miles per hour. And do not laugh. This may look like a tourist attraction or a fairground ride, but it is not. This, ladies and gentlemen, was the world's first regular passenger carrying railway powered by electricity. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. It was only a quarter of a mile long, Volks's railway, when it opened in 1883, but it was a massive hit. In one bank holiday alone, the little train carried over 1,000 passengers.
This railway was the first practical application of another revolutionary discovery.
The electric motor.
Yet another breakthrough for the father of electricity. The principles behind the electric motor were first demonstrated on September the 4th, 1821.
Faraday proved that by using magnetism and current he could generate movement. The magnet's in the central core and current is passed via the mercury to this rotor here.
Although in Faraday's experiments he was only rotating a piece of wire, the same principles are used in modern motors.
Within 60 years of Michael Faraday's invention of the electric motor and 4 years of Magnus Volk's Brighton Railway, work had started on the City and South London line, the world's first electric underground railway.
The electric motor had a vast range of possible applications, from transport networks to the small and everyday.
Hello there. Believe it or not, the vacuum cleaner was one of the first applications of the electric motor. And Mr. H. Cecil Booth thought of it after he'd seen a blower being used to clean railway carriages at St Pancras station. He realised that suction would do the job much better, and he patented his idea in 1901. And soon, electric motors were transforming the workplace.
Electricity had more than proved its worth, and more people wanted a piece of the action. At the end of the 19th century, streets in cities like Newcastle were still dependent on gas lighting. But all that was about to change.
This is Moseley Street, the first street to be lit by electric light. In November 1880, the Watch Committee reported to the local council. Having, by the kindness of Mr. Swan, had the workings of his electric light explained to them, that they be authorised to incur an expense of not more than £100 for the purposes of lighting Moseley Street as an experiment. The experiment worked, and the following year the gas lights went forever.
The reason why Swan was interested in Moseley Street was that he worked here. This is the site of his workshop, and the power to illuminate the street was generated just there. So it's a real local deal, parochial, some might say. So although factories and houses and streets were now being illuminated by electricity, the days when organisations generated their own couldn't last.
What was once a scientific toy had by the end of the 19th century become an incredibly versatile source of power, and in 1882 Parliament passed the Electric Lighting Act. The Act authorised companies and communities to install electric lights everywhere. The trick now was to be able to produce electricity on a large scale and make it available to everyone, cheaply and efficiently. This is Elidir. Locally, it's known as Electric Mountain.
It contains a powerful secret. It's home to the big brother of Cragside's electricity generating station. But this one doesn't just generate electricity for one home, it generates electricity for millions. But in order to get the necessary head of water to do that, you're going to need something more substantial than diverting Lord Armstrong's waterfall. How about that? Marklin Mower Reservoir, 636 metres above sea level. It holds 7 million cubic metres of water. And if you look on the dam face there, you can see some tide marks. They're not there because somebody's used their lawn sprinkler. They're there because the water level in this dam can rise and fall 34 metres. Because on instruction, this water can be fed through a system of pipes and then dropped down a shaft 568 metres. That's 11 times the height of Nelson's Column to a power station down there.
Built in the 1970s, this is the ultimate refinement of Cragside's hydroelectric generating plant.
Electric Mountain, otherwise known as the Norwich Power Station, is a labyrinth of over 16 kilometres of dark, imposing tunnels and caverns, blasted, drilled and constructed in the heart of Elidir Mountain.
This place is incredible. It's like the set of a Bond movie.
This generating station works in exactly the same way as Cragside, except it's a bit bigger. I'm standing in the largest man-made cavern in Europe. It's absolutely amazing. If you look at the tops of the generators there, blue tops, 60 metres below that are the rotors that turn them. So we're only seeing the top third of this. It could accommodate St Paul's Cathedral. It's absolutely awesome.
The whole process starts deep down in the depths of the mountain.
This is an inlet valve. It is the biggest valve I have ever seen. It's holding back a column of water 600 metres up there, up to Machlinmauer Reservoir. And when it's released, a column of water is powered through there and turns the turbines, which turn the generators. There are 6 of these controlling 6 generators. It's fantastic, it's awesome, but why so big, and why the comparison with Cragside? After all, Cragside was a small domestic generating station. But this is just a big domestic generating station. When millions of us finish watching a telly programme and turn on the kettle, you need these huge pump storage stations to supply the demand. There are millions of us and millions of kettles. Armstrong created his own monster. We are so dependent on electricity. We need these. We're not mucking about, we're not showing off. These installations are vital. That stupendous force of water turns a turbine. It's like a horizontal water wheel. The water hits into the side and spins that central shaft at 500 RPM. That speed generates the electricity with the generator upstairs. The most brilliant thing about these is that they can reverse these turbines, so at night when electricity is cheaper, the process can be reversed and the water pumped back up to Machlinmauer Reservoir to be used again. This is the control room at the Norwich Power Station. This is a diagram of the whole system. Here's Machlinmauer Reservoir, Machlinmauer, water, whoosh, 6 turbines, Lecky. This is an incredibly fast, responsive station. Derek here, on demand, can generate 1,380 megawatts of electricity within 12 seconds. Most conventional power stations take 12 hours to start from cold.
This vast power station is as impressive as the works of engineering giants like Brunel, Stevenson and Telford. It's a vital element in the battle to satisfy our insatiable demand for power.
When Michael Faraday, the electrical pioneer, was explaining one of his inventions to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he was asked, "But after all, sir, what use is it?" Faraday replied, "Well, sir, there is every probability that you will soon be able to tax it."
Faraday was spot on. Today we all want instant power. We expect it. Electricity is big business.